They are not unbeatable. There have been bigger upsets in sports history. We're going to keep improving our roster. We're used to long odds. If Golden State makes the odds longer, we might up our risk profile and get even more aggressive. We have something up our sleeve.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily podcast on fantasy basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and as always you can find me on Twitter at redrock_bball. We're here to talk about the Houston Rockets and do their season in review podcast, so
let's get to it.
But before we get to it, there has been a couple of big news items drop in the NBA in the past 24 hours. So I will talk about those briefly. Of course, the first one of those is the decision of the Boston Celtics to trade the number 1 draft pick to the Philadelphia 76ers in exchange for the number 3 draft pick, the 2018 Lakers first round draft choice, which is protected, meaning that if the pick falls between pick 2 and pick 5, the Celtics will get it. If it is pick 1 or 6 to 30, then it will remain with Philadelphia. And then in that case, the Celtics will then get the 2019 Sacramento Kings first round pick. And at this point, it looks like that Kings pick will be unprotected, but there is some whispers that maybe there will be some protection on that Kings pick if the Lakers pick doesn't convey in 2018. So that means that Markelle Fultz is going to be a member of the Philadelphia 76ers. And as such, I'm getting questions, what does this do to Fultz's projection in Philly? Where is he? Is he a top 50 guy? All this sort of stuff. Now, the first thing I'll say is I haven't done any work on any team-specific projections at all for next season. There's still way too much water to go under the bridge. But my initial thought, and this is pretty much always the case with rookies, is that taking someone as a rookie inside the top 50 is a risky proposition. You are drafting them at their peak, at their best case scenario, whereas the majority of outcomes would see them being worse than that. And I know everyone's always excited to get their hands on a rookie and get their hands on the hot new thing, but in general, it doesn't work out. My projections for the rookies haven't changed in terms of what I did initially in that, I look at it as a team-specific team-independent, minutes-independent projections. And in that case, Fultz actually came out behind Lonzo Ball in that case, but I still think that Fultz is the better player, and I still think Fultz will be the better fantasy player, and he would be the number 1 dynasty pick. And he is almost without doubt going to go inside the top 100 in drafts coming up. No doubt about that at all. I would probably have him in that 90 to 110-ish range, maybe, around that sort of zone. He will probably end up going in the 70s. Historically, rookie point guards don't do well. Chris Paul is the exception to that rule, but the others do struggle quite a bit. Even your studs like James Harden, like Russell Westbrook, they didn't put together brilliant first fantasy campaigns. And with Simmons handling the ball quite a bit, Fultz's assist numbers aren't going to have that upside to go to 6 or 7. I don't think he's more going to be a 4.5, 5 assist sort of a player. And I think that can limit him. So the one thing I can say with 100% surety is he will get overdrafted. I am 100% confident of that. And in a non-dynasty, non-keeper setting, I probably won't end up with Markelle Fultz on any of my teams because he will start going in the 50s, in the 60s, I am pretty sure. And look, that might be where he ends up. But expecting him to be better than that or get to that zone on the majority of outcomes if we simulated this millions of times, I don't think that would necessarily be how it goes, but I haven't run through all the projections for all 30 teams and done any of that, which is what we start to do at the end of July and through August, so we can get the Basketball Monster site ready to open up at the end of August. So I don't know how that all works out, but it definitely 100% improves his output from where it was in Boston, where he would have been an undraftable standard league player last season. He is 100% going to be a draftable player. He's 100% going to be drafted, and he's 100% going to be overdrafted. But it is exciting for Philadelphia fans. From a Boston point of view, I am still skeptical of the deal, but if there are other deals in the works, then maybe it is the best thing. I think mainly because the reporting of Josh Jackson being the guy the Celtics want. I'm just not a big Josh Jackson fan. If they end up taking Jason Tatum at 3, I'm okay with that. I'm just not a huge Josh Jackson fan. To give up that opportunity to get Fultz so you can get your hands on Josh Jackson, to me, doesn't sound like the greatest move. But again, we and Danny Ainge and all these people are guessing a lot in the draft because, as I said a few weeks ago, the last time that the top 2 picks in any NBA draft made the All-Star, not even in the same season, but made the All-Star at any point in their career, was 18 years ago in 1999. So those first 2 picks where you should be getting your 2 stars, doesn't work that way. It hasn't worked that way for 18 years. Maybe that's the case this year, but you are not guaranteed a stud with whatever pick that you pick. You are not guaranteed anything. So, Fultz is not guaranteed anything. Pick 3 is not guaranteed anything. Maybe Josh Jackson turns out to be good. I don't know. But that's my current thought on that situation. The other piece of news that came out is Paul George telling the Indiana Pacers that he will not return to the franchise after next season, and his preference is to go to the Lakers. I'm not a big Paul George fan, as you're well aware. I respect his fantasy abilities, no doubt, and can separate that completely. I just think he is a marginal shit bloke, and I'm sure the Pacers fans are echoing that at the moment. I don't think that the Lakers should be going anywhere near him in a trade. Do not trade for him. Do not waste assets if he's going to come there anyway. And some teams will look to get him. But you're only talking about the teams that are right up the top that are looking to push to challenge. The Cavs, the Celtics have said they probably won't. The Raptors, maybe, they'll be the teams that look to acquire him for one season. And the Pacers just need to take anything they can. They should also not be looking to re-sign guys like Jeff Teague, and they should be starting to rebuild around Miles Turner, because Jeff Teague's going to get overpaid, and he's not that good, and he's older than you anticipate as well. And if they can find any way to get themselves out of Monte Ellis and Al Jefferson's contract, and maybe not re-sign CJ Miles, this is going to be the best mode of action for the Pacers. If Paul George says he's not going to be around, then there's no point surrounding him with the talent to help him push for the 7th seed. There's no point in any of that. So definitely a huge couple of days of developments in the NBA. Just to give you an idea before we get into this Rocket stuff of what's going to be happening this week. We've got Rocket show today. We've got the Spurs show tomorrow. Then the Warriors show the day after that. Then on Thursday, or Wednesday actually, Thursday my time, on Wednesday for you guys, we will have the mock draft show. And then after that, it'll be the NBA draft, and I'll do an NBA draft recap. And then the following week after that, I'm not 100% sure what we're going to be putting out. Definitely won't be 5 shows that week, I can tell you that, but there will be a couple of shows going down that week discussing numerous different things. But yeah, that's my quick take on the Fultz trade and the Paul George situation. So now let's talk Houston Rockets. Surprise packet, this Rockets team. I thought they would be much better than they were. I didn't think they would be this good. They finished with a 55-27 record, which was bang on their point differential expected win-loss total. And again, many people were critical of the Mike D'Antoni hire. I never understand the criticism that D'Antoni constantly gets. It does bother me quite a lot, but I'm glad that he was able to put together a winning season. The fade out in the playoffs is always going to come back to bite him on the ass again, but he was impressive, as was the majority of this team throughout the season. For the draft, the Rockets don't have a first-round pick. They traded that to the Lakers to acquire Lou Williams, so they have 2 second-rounders, pick 43 and 45, but as Daryl Morey was alluding to in that opening quote to the show, they have tricks up their sleeve, apparently, so let's see exactly what they can do. There are always going to be players for weird trades or free agent moves. They always seem to be in a position to be able to do that sort of thing. Free agency. The only guy that this really is a concern here is Nene, who's an unrestricted free agent, who was absolutely fantastic for this team next season. Now, I'm not 100% sure that he comes back. They do have the table, Montrezl Harrell, who was pretty impressive in his time replacing Nene. And, of course, Clint Capella, who I think is due for a much, much larger role and is able to do it and should be doing it. So, I'm not sure that Nene returns. The other guys they've got, Isaiah Taylor and Kyle Wiltshire are on $1.3 million non-guaranteed deals. And you can talk about how good this Rockets roster is. The bottom of this roster is one of the shittest bottoms of a roster you could find in an NBA. Isaiah Taylor, Kyle Wiltshire. They've got Bobby Brown as a restricted free agent and Troy Williams as a restricted free agent. That's their 4 bottom guys on their roster, and that is atrocious. No offense to Bobby, Troy, Isaiah, and Kyle, but that is horrible. Do any of those guys come back? I don't think there should be any rush to bring them back. Yeah, Brown showed a little bit Troy Williams had some decent moments, but there's nothing spectacular with any of those guys. So you could see all 5 of those guys not being on this Rockets roster next season. Now, I haven't heard any information about them bringing over any of their stash players, which we'll talk about later. So maybe one of those guys comes across and fills that role, but they're definitely not huge losses apart from Nene if they all happen to walk. They were second in the NBA in offensive rating, no surprise there, and 18th in defensive rating, which I think a lot of people would have been surprised that they would have pegged them for the 28th or 29th best defense, and they were right in the middle, and having that combination is what enabled them to get 55 wins. They were third in pace and first in three-point attempt rate, no surprise there. Second in free throw rate, again, no surprise there. I think the thing that should surprise you is the fact that they were this good and they were still only 15th in three-point percentage. Imagine they shot as the third or fourth best team from three, how actually more deadly that team could be. And that's something to bear in mind. They also were 24th in turnovers, so they did turn over the ball quite a bit. The best offensive rating on this team goes to the table, Montrezl Harrell, then Clint Capella, then Ryan Anderson, then Troy Williams and Chinana Onwuaku, while the best defensive rating went to Kyle Wiltshire, followed by Nene, Onwuaku, and Capella, so quite a few big men in that group, which tends to be the case. They had only 4 guys shoot 40% on corner threes, again, just showing that this team, they could do a lot better in terms of their three-point shooting. Bobby Brown, Ryan Anderson, Troy Williams, and Lou Williams. So 2 of those guys didn't even play in Troy Williams and Bobby Brown. They just didn't see the court. So their corner threes, they could have been a lot more efficient. Jim Harden was 68% at the rim. Yeah, that's one of the big strengths of Harden. He's obviously strong. He gets to the line. He shoots threes. But his ability to finish at the rim is huge. And that's part of his game there. Well, Lou Williams was just 53% at the rim. He does struggle in that area. The highest percentage of their shots between 10 of 16 feet that got converted, Ryan Anderson hit 44% of his shots between 10 and 16 feet. No one was higher. And they barely take mid-range shots, but still that is a remarkably low amount as the highest number on your team. The player that took the most shots from that range, Lou Williams, and he only took 10% of his shots. Again, this team does not take mid-ranges. It's all threes, it's all layups and free throws. That's all they do. And it works. Their offense is fine, and it was fun to watch finally for the Rockets this season after the Dwight Howard, James Harden excruciating offense that we had to watch. It was just so painful to watch. This was actually super fun watching the Rockets play this way with Harden orchestrating everything. The advanced stats leaders, it's a lot of Harden, of course. He led the team in PER at 27.3, while Onwuaku led the true shooting at 79.9. But as for regular players, it was the table at 66. Harden at 34 usage, win shares led in win shares 48, offensive box score plus minus, and VORP, while the defensive box score plus minus was led by Harden and Pat Beverly. They were both equal on 1.5 with Chinana Onwuaku at 1.8, but he barely played. So if we go to the regular contributors, surprisingly, Jim Harden was number 1 on the team in defensive box score plus minus. They had 9 lineups that played over 100 minutes, and that's a common thing for D'Antoni. He doesn't dig into the bench very much. He uses his core players and uses them a lot. 9 lineups over 100. The most used lineup, Anderson, Ariza, Pat Bev, Capella, and Harden, and that was a whopping plus 16.7. So I always love to see when the most used lineup is a huge positive. The best 5-man lineup, it's very similar. Anderson, Ariza, but you've got Eric Gordon in for Pat Beverly, you've got Harden, and you've got Nene in for Capella, and that was a plus 20. So it's not that much different from that most used lineup. Their best 4-man, or their most used 4-man, Anderson, Ariza, Beverly, and Harden was a plus 10.2, while their best 4-man, Anderson, Capella, Beverly, and Harden, so no Ariza, was a plus 16.5, but that's 4 of their 5 starters in that group. Their most used 3-man, Ryan Anderson, Trevor Ariza, and Harden is a plus 10.1, and their best 3-man, Anderson, Beverly, Capella, another grouping of those starters, plus 15.9, while their most used 2-man was Ariza and Harden for a plus 6.5. Their best 2-man, my man again, Patrick Beverly and Clint Capella as a plus 11.8. Now they have quite a few stash options on this team. Sergio Llull, the Spanish point guard, he is now 29 years of age, 6'3". I don't feel like he is going to come over at any point and be a real impact player just because of the contract he has signed with Real Madrid. I don't think he can come over this season. It might even be another year, so he'll be 30 plus when he is able to come over, and therefore his ability to come in as a 30-plus-year-old rookie and be a long-term starter or star is going to be diminished. But he is a really good player. In his 28 minutes per game for Real, he averaged 16.7 points, 1.5 rebounds, 5.5 assists, 0.6 steals, shot 43, 34, and 83, and hit 2.2 threes per game for a PER of 21 and true shooting of 56. He is impressive. If he was to come over, he would have an impact in fantasy leagues, but it's going to be less than what it would have been a couple of years ago. Another player they have got stashed is Alessandro Gentile, a 24-year-old Italian small forward. He is 6'6". He played for 3 teams last season, Milan, Panathinaikos, and Jerusalem, and was piss poor. 17 minutes, 6.6 points, 2.5 rebounds, 1.5 assists for a PER of 11, and he shot 15% on threes and 47% from the line. As a wing player, that is horrendous. True shooting at 46 is horrendous, and a negative 14.9 net rating. Horrendous. The other guy that is very, very interesting, Zhou Qi, the 7'2" Chinese center. He is 21 years of age. He played last season for Jinjiang Guanghui, which I'm sure is pronounced incorrectly. 33 minutes a game, 16 and 10 with a steal a game, 2.3 blocks, shot 56, 36 from 3, and 72 from the line. Half a 3 a game, had a PER of 21, a true shooting of 63, and a net rating of 19.3. Just a reminder that he was a ridiculously highly projected fantasy player for last season. Kevin Pelton's rookie translations had him projected extraordinarily highly as well. And yes, he plays in an inflated stats league in China. That was taken into consideration. He is potentially a little bit older than the 21 years of age and he's quite frail. But he is a guy that can come across and block threes. Well, he can block shots, actually. He can block shots, he can hit threes, he can be efficient, he can grab rebounds, and he can score. And if he was to find himself in only a 25-minute-a-night role, he would sneak himself inside the top 150. I am very, very confident of that. So he is, out of those guys, he is the best stash guy that they have. Now, no word has come out whether he is looking to come over, but they could bring him over and move him into that backup role if Nene moves on. So he is definitely a fantasy name to watch. So keep an eye on Zhou Qi. All right, let's move on to these players now. We'll talk about them in a bit more detail. Of course, let's start with Jim Harden, the number 1 fantasy player for the season. In my head-to-head ranks, he actually dropped to 2 at the end of the year, with Russ taking over from him, but he was obviously amazing, as we are well aware. 36 minutes a game, 29 points, 3 triples, 8 rebounds, 11 assists, 1.5 steals, half a block, 44, 85, and 35 for a true shooting of 61. So he wasn't in the Russell Westbrook category of, you're close to that punting field goal percentage. He was only a -1 in the standard score for that category, so that is very recoverable from. The turnovers were really bad, 5.7, but you by now know my thoughts in turnovers, and that dropped him to being the 7th player in 9-cat leagues, and there is absolutely zero way that you would ever take him at number 7 in a 9-cat league. You just wouldn't do it. He was amazing all year. He missed only 1 game, which was like the second last game of the season. Big minutes in every game, 50-point triple-doubles. He was, if it wasn't for Russell Westbrook, Harden would win the MVP hands down. I still thought he was my MVP. Well, I still think he is my MVP. I don't think he's going to win it, but that is the player that I would have picked. He was amazing. I'd probably say he was the fantasy MVP, even though that Westbrook did just sneak that number 1 head-to-head rank at the end of the year, but you could go either way there pretty clearly. He was amazing, and I would expect a similar type season from him, and to me, he is the early favourite to be pick 1, up there with guys like Westbrook, KD, and Towns. Would be my discussion points for pick 1 at this early point. After that, Trevor Ariza. They had no other top 50 players, which I think some people would be surprised at, given this is D'Antoni, and people are real. Everyone was super excited that D'Antoni was coming. It's going to really push everyone up through the roof. They're going to go bananas with their stats. Ryan Anderson's going to be a top 30 player. I saw some people say, yeah, cool, no worries. Trevor Ariza will be a top 30 guy. Yeah, nah, not quite. So they did things, but they weren't sensational. Ariza was 54th. He played 35 minutes a game in 80 games. 11.7 points, 2.4 triples, 5.5 boards, 2.2 assists, 1.8 steals, 41, 74, and 34. So when we look at Ariza, we go, look, they're great 3 numbers and they're fantastic steal numbers. but there's not much else there. The rebounds are okay. He doesn't block shots. The percentages are both bad. What do we look at for Trevor Ariza moving forward? He is 32 years of age already. He did have a bit of a fall off after the All-Star break, went from 56th pre-All-Star to 84th post-All-Star. So a bit of a drop off in his numbers there. The threes and steals are still going to be there, but as we know, threes have a lower value in my opinion. Steals have an extraordinarily high value, so that does help him, but he is going to be hurting you in both percentages and not scoring huge amounts either. In that post-All-Star period, he averaged just 11.6 points. His threes were down to 2 a game, and his steals went down to 1.6 while still having those poor percentages. So I wouldn't be expecting Trevor Ariza to become a top 50 player. I wouldn't be picking him anywhere near that. To me, he's a guy that you grab around that 75 type of a mark and get those steal numbers and get some threes and be happy with those positive contributions. 2 positive contributions is better than 1. It's better than none, which some of those guys that are behind him would end up giving you. Patrick Beverley. Only 67 games for Beverley. Started the season a little bit late due to an injury. 31 minutes a game, 9.5 points, but still found himself as the 64th ranked player. He, like Ariza, fell off a little bit after the All-Star break, was the 93rd ranked guy post-All-Star, but for the season, 9.5 points, 1.6 triples, 6 boards, 4.2 assists, 1.5 steals, half a block, 42, 77, and 38 as his percentages. So you're getting the value there from his assists, above average rebounding, and then some solid steals and solid threes. So just marginally behind Ariza in the threes and steals, but adds those assists in. And I don't really see much changing for Beverley unless free agency does muck things up. He is going to play 30 to 31 minutes. He's going to probably score 10 points with 1.5 threes and 4 assists and be that guy that if you did miss out on the mid-round point guard run that is going to happen, I guarantee you that, he'd be a player that you take towards. I wouldn't take him at 64, which is where he ended up. No way. I'd be looking at him more as a guy 80, 85, 90, that sort of a zone. And he's going to be, to me, he'd be around the Markelle Fultz type of range in that sort of a zone. And I'd probably rather take Fultz in that scenario. But he is solid. He's reliable, but by no means would I go into that top 60 zone to consider Pat Bev. Lou Williams was the 68th ranked player for the season, but it's more indicative for us to look at what he did while he was in Houston, where he was the 135th ranked player. And he saw his role decrease. I was going to say rather dramatically, but his minutes didn't really change. In fact, after the All-Star break, he played more minutes than what he did when he was in LA. 26 minutes a game for Houston. 14.8 points, 1.8 threes, 3 rebounds, 2.5 assists, 0.7 steals. But what happened is he shot 38% from the field and 87% from the line and 32 from 3. Whereas in LA, he was shooting career high numbers from the field, and he ended up the season with a 43% field goal percentage. The previous 3 seasons, he'd been at 40% for 3 years in a row. So he was shooting at career high numbers in LA, and it went to Houston, and not only did it drop off back to norms, but it went below the norms. So the numbers that we saw from him in Houston are probably a little bit deflated, and I could expect them to go up. But under no circumstance would I be anticipating Lou Williams to put up first half Lakers numbers. Even if he had remained in Los Angeles, I wouldn't be expecting Lou Williams to put up those first half Lakers numbers again, because they were numbers that didn't really jive with anything that he had done throughout his career, and it was a really large efficiency boost. Now, he is a player that you can get late that can have an influence on free throw percentage, and that in itself is very valuable. The scoring can be valuable, and he's not a slouch with assists, but the field goal percentage is going to be a problem, and he is not going to have as large a role as what he did with the Lakers, even though the minutes did go up in Houston. It's more the actual role and the ability to hog the ball as much as he did in LA. So while he was a guy that did drop out with his ranking from 53rd post All-Star or pre-All-Star to 110th post, I like him as that guy around that 100 mark. Maybe you go a little bit earlier and you hope that his 38% post All-Star shooting goes to 40, goes to 41, and that gives him an extra point and a little bit of a boost in those percentage categories, because that is really what took him down in that second half of the year again, despite getting more minutes in that time frame. My boy Clint Capella, was the 80th ranked player for the season. I was big on him. I said that in head-to-head ranks or head-to-head games, he had top 40, top 35 type upside. It didn't turn out that he got to that zone, but he was the 54th player in my head-to-head rank. So from where you were able to draft him, which was like 90, 100, he definitely repaid that value there. Part of the reason he wasn't able to achieve exactly what I hoped was the fact that he played under 24 minutes a game, which to me was one of the big downfallings of what D'Antoni did. Now, Nene was useful, but Capello is the best centre there. And he was, I thought he was really impressive through majority of the season. He did suffer a broken leg during the year, came back from that, but he was an impressive player. He had super impressive advanced numbers as well, great win shares per 48, nice defensive box score plus minus, awesome true shooting. And the thing that has been an issue for him is his free throw percentage, but he's gone from 17% in his first season to 38% in his second season, up to 53% last season. So it is a big change, and for him, it is all mental, because in the D-League, he can hit free throws. He hits them at like 70%-ish, or around that mark. So he can do it. It is definitely a mental thing for Clint Capella, and no matter what you say, go and practice them. Oh, they're paid professionals. They should shoot free throws all day. Like, he can shoot them. It is a mental thing, and maybe things can be changed in that sense, and with psychological training. But that's the issue for Capella. It is not a physical thing, for him whatsoever. In the playoffs, I thought he was impressive playing the extra minutes. He got to 26 minutes a game. He averaged 2.5 blocks in the playoffs. 8.7 boards and 10.5 points. The return of Nene does have an impact on Capella if Nene happens to return, but I would be stunned if Capella doesn't play more than 24 minutes next season. Absolutely stunned. I'm not sure he gets to 30, but if he's playing 27, then he becomes a top 50 player. And he becomes a top 50 player that you don't have to draft in the top 50. His free throw percentage impact last season was better than LeBron James and Rudy Gobert. Think about that. So you can put Capella, he's a punt free throw guy. He was less harmful to your free throws than Gobert and less harmful to your free throws than LeBron. He averaged 12.5 points and 8 boards in under 24 minutes. 0.5 steals and 1.2 blocks, and those blocks have got the potential to shoot through the roof. He, to me, has got breakout written all over him. I think he's a really impressive player, really good defensive player, and is going to be a top 50 fantasy guy probably next season, again, based on their head-to-head of removing those free throws out of the consideration. He was super impressive, played few minutes, and even if Nene does come back, Nene's minutes might cut down a little bit. He'll probably be rested a little bit more. And I don't see Montrezl Harrell coming in and taking that job. It is Capella's. He's the best center on this team by a long way. Eric Gordon was the 94th ranked player this season, but like so many others, he did fall off after the break. 70th pre and 101st post All-Star. He hit 3.3 threes a game, and that's the positive. So, he hit 3.3 threes. Everything else, not great. 16 points, 2.7 rebounds, 2.5 assists, 0.6 steals, half a block, 41 and 84. Now, maybe I'm being harsh because 16.2 points is a positive. 2.5 assists is close to a positive. 84 from the line is a positive, but it's on such minimal attempts that it doesn't have really any impact. You take threes out of the equation for Eric Gordon, he's like the 180th ranked player. I would not be expecting Eric Gordon to replay or redo what he did at the start of the year. His post-All-Star numbers are more likely where he was only at 2.7 threes, but that knocked his scoring down by a full 2 points per game. His assist numbers dropped with Lou Williams around. His efficiency dropped. I would not be considering Eric Gordon to be a top 100 player. I would not be considering Eric Gordon to be that top 70 guy that he was before the All-Star break. His value is coming almost exclusively from threes. And with Williams around, I'm not convinced. I'm just not convinced that he's going to be able to replicate. That's the word. I'm not sure he's going to be able to replicate that. And when I'm looking at late picks, I generally want some upside with him, and I'm not even sure that he offers much upside. He might be able to be drafted at 130 and he goes to 110, maybe. Is that enough? I'm not sure. I wouldn't be falling over myself to say I've got to get Eric Gordon, and I like Eric Gordon, but with the Harden, Beverly, Williams situation there, he did play a lot at the 3 as well, which is something that will continue to happen and play alongside Beverly and Harden or with Williams as well. It's just that the way that his game tended to go at the end of the season, things started to regress. I'm not in on Eric Gordon next season. By the way, Lou Williams was the worst on this team for on-off at -5, so that is, he wasn't good. There's no doubt he wasn't good for this team. That was pretty clear. Speaking of not good, Ryan Anderson was the 128th ranked player for the season in only 29 minutes a game, 13.6 points, 2.8 triples, 4.5 rebounds, an assist, half a steal, 0.2 blocks, 42 and 86 and 40% from 3. Great 3-point shooting. Fantastic. 2.8 threes a game. Awesome. Terrible at everything else. Terrible. Legit, people were telling me that he's going to be a top 40 player last season, and I could not get behind it under any circumstance. At this point, Ryan Anderson is just not good. He is a good 3-point shooter. He provides good spacing, but he is just not a good player. He is an absolute nothing on the defensive end. He gives you no fantasy numbers, no assists, no steals, no blocks. 4 rebounds is just putrid. Poor field goal percentage. Great free throws. Doesn't get to the line, so it doesn't matter. He is just not a good fantasy player. He did lead the team with a plus 6.2 in his on-off number, so he's got that going for him. But I don't even think he's a standard league ownable player, and I wouldn't take him at anything more than my second last pick. But there is no way that I would want him anywhere near the top 100. He just isn't that guy. And with the Rockets going smaller a lot, playing Ariza up at the 4, he just struggles quite a bit. And I'm just not. I just don't feel it with Anderson at all. I think that he's going to be like Gordon, one of those guys that should go probably in the last couple of picks of a draft, and even then, their value's all coming from threes. Maybe I can find someone else who's got top 70 upside, because I don't think it's either of those two guys. And that's not saying anything about what they're going to do on the court or how successful they'll be with the Rockets, because I think they'll be similar. I just don't think they're going to have any real fantasy great impact. Nene was the 196th ranked player in his 67 games, 18 minutes, 9 points, 4 boards, 0.8 steals, 0.6 blocks, 62 and 59 as his percentages. A real surprising season from Nene. He had opportunities. He had times when he was super impressive. It just, obviously with the minutes that he gets limited, the games that he sits out, even playing 20-team leagues, he is a hard guy to own. And you would think that that's probably going to remain the case for the majority of his career from here on out. After the All-Star break, he was 109th, which is a surprisingly high number, in large part due to the fact that he shot 63% from the field and averaged 11.5 points. He does still have some use, but it's not going to be anywhere near 12, 14, or 16 team leagues, in my opinion, for Nene, as the games continue to be sat and the minutes continue to be limited. The table, Montrezl Harrell, 18 minutes for him in his 58 games, 9 points, 3.8 rebounds, 0.7 blocks, 65 and 63. His numbers just look extraordinarily similar to Nene's. They are almost identical. The same amount of points, the same amount of minutes, 0.3 less rebounds, 0.1 more assists, 0.1 more blocks. The major difference is that Nene got half a steal more, and Harrell went 65 from the field instead of 62 from the field. But overall, their numbers are really similar. Now, people love the table, and I understand why. He's got funky dreadlocks with red bits in them. He's an energy rebounder. I don't think he is that good. He has games where he puts up numbers, and he is a player that if he plays, he will put up fantasy numbers. There is no doubt about that. He will put up those numbers. He will get out there and put up. He had a 29-point game. He had a run of 16, 17, 14 points in a row. Double-doubles with multiple blocks. But he is not an excellent shot blocker. He is an okay one. He did improve that area. He's also not a supreme rebounder, averaging just 7.4 boards per 36, which is not a good amount. So for all the energy and this is the aggressive bench rebounder, he's not a good one. He's not a good rebounder. He did improve his scoring a lot. His efficiency was awesome. And that points, field goal percentage, some blocks, some rebounds has usefulness. His upside is nowhere near what Capella's is, in my opinion. And he shouldn't be playing over Capella. And I don't think that he will. He is a deeper league guy, and I don't have massive hopes for his future. I think he can be a rotational player, a backup big, who is a guy that maybe has a top 170 season, maybe has a top 150 season in fantasy, but I don't have mammoth hopes for him moving forward. Troy Williams played a little bit in Memphis, started some games there, didn't do much in his time in Houston. I don't think he's got a huge future ahead of him. He played 6 games for the Rockets, started 3 of them. I think he had one game where he had a real decent performance. He averaged 9 points in those games, 23 minutes a game. Shot the ball well from the field, 50% from the field, 38 from 3, 4 rebounds, but he was an undrafted rookie. Look, they might bring him back as a restricted free agent. Memphis did waive him, so he's not on that initial rookie contract or that initial contract that Memphis signed him to. I don't really ever see him coming more than a top 250 player at any point in his career. But yeah, he had a few moments where you went, okay, all right, maybe there's something there, but I don't really think so. Sammy Dekker. I was primed for a Dekker breakout this season. We didn't quite get it, but what we did get is a massive improvement from his non-existent rookie season. 77 games for Dekker, ended prematurely with a broken hand. 18.4 minutes, 6.5 points, 0.8 threes, 3.7 rebounds, half a steal, 0.3 blocks, 47, 56, and 32. So the percentages obviously impact him, especially that poor free throw percentage, the poor field goal percentage. But I was impressed with Dekker on the court. And with Ariza moving to the age of 32, Ryan Anderson not getting any younger and definitely not getting any more nimble at the age of 29, Dekker's a guy for maybe 2 years' time that I look to and think that he will start on this team and he will be a top 120 player in the next, or after 2 more years. I think that he will be a top 120 player when his rookie year deal is done and he has to sign that extension or go to restricted free agency. I think that Dekker will be starting for this team, and I think he will be a top 120 guy. Now, I don't think that he has got top 75 upside. I don't think that, but I think he can score, rebound, get some steals, shoot some threes, and get that efficiency up as well, and be a solid back-end type fantasy guy. But you are a couple of years away from that. But legit, if someone said halfway through the season, Sam Dekker's starting over Ryan Anderson, I wouldn't be surprised, because Anderson does have his foibles, and I could see Dekker coming in there and playing, instead of the 18 a game he played this season, playing 24 or 25 and jumping into 16-team league considerations. Chinana Onwuaku only played 5 games, 10 minutes, so we didn't get to see much of him. 2.8 points, 2 rebounds, 0.6 steals, did not miss a single free throw, shot them underhand, did not miss a single one. Very, very interesting. Onwuaku does have high fantasy upside. Whether he can get there or not remains to be seen. Is just a deeper league, 30-team dynasty type of situation, maybe say 24-team league, maybe that zone. But he does have good fantasy upside. But he is obviously behind Capella and Harrell, and then there is Joe Chi that could come across as well and impact what Onwuaku is able to do. But don't be surprised to see him take a little bit of a step forward this season, Onwuaku, and that could be another reason why Nene doesn't come back, as they feel more comfortable. Oh, geez. Felt like I swallowed a fly. That they might be more comfortable coming back with Harrell, Onwuaku, Capella as a center trio with no Nene and no Chi. The rest of the guys on this roster, Jesus. Bobby Brown, 5 minutes a game. Kyle Wiltshire, 3 minutes a game. Isaiah Taylor, 4 games, 13 minutes. I don't think I got to see anything out of those guys that would make me think, yeah. Brown shot 38 from the field. Wiltshire shot 29 and Taylor shot 14%. I wouldn't touch those guys even in a 30-team league. I don't think there's any value in them. I can't see them being any level of NBA players, and so much so I'm not even going to discuss them all individually. There is nothing to see with those players, and I wouldn't be putting any faith in them doing anything positive as we move forward. Question time. Jordan, Was it Lou Williams that damaged Eric Gordon's value post All-Star break? Yes and no. Yes, it was. And then his shooting dropped off as well. But remember, his shooting or his value was based on the fact that he was hitting 3.5 threes per game. And when that dropped down to 2.7, that's when his value went from 70th to 120th or whatever it was. And his field goal percentage dropped as well. So while Lou Williams arriving did have an impact, it didn't really reduce Eric Gordon's playing time that much. He still played 32 minutes a game. So it wasn't a huge discrepancy. In fact, before the All-Star break, or so his numbers for the season was 31 minutes ago. So he actually played more minutes. It was more, I guess, the touches that did decline. What was his usage? Okay, don't have that up in front of me. But yeah, so it is partly Lou Williams. It's also just partly regression with from a hot start with Eric Gordon. James C. Trevor Ariza, how many top 50 seasons does he have left? None. He wasn't a top 50 player this season. I guess if you want to count 9-cat leagues and put turnovers in there, which you know that I'm just very, very anti, he was a top 50 player in 9-cat leagues. None. I don't think he's a top 50 player at all anymore. Kyle says, can Capella handle 30 minutes per game next season? Will he need to play that much? Can he handle? Yes, of course he can. Will he need to play that much? I don't think D'Antoni will do that, but I'm pretty sure he'll play more than 24 minutes a game. And he says the table looked good when he played. How do his minutes look for next year? Well, it all depends on what Nene does. If Nene moves, then Harrell becomes the backup center. But as I said earlier, I'm not a massive fan of his upside, I guess. Bugsy Mogs says, will Sam Dekker ever get a significant role in Houston? Yes, probably a couple of years away, I believe. He already had a solid role. Yes, 18 minutes in 77 games. He was the seventh man on this team before Williams arrived. I think he moves into a larger role in a couple of years. And Fawad Maan says, any chance for the Rockets to get Hayward or Chris Paul? I would say no to both of those. I can't see it happening. Chris Paul one especially, I don't see happening. Maybe Gordon Hayward, but no, I don't see that happening for Houston. I can't see that being the case. Maybe anything can happen. Daryl Morey's got tricks up his sleeves, but I do not see that being the case. All right, that does it for today's show. A little bit of talk about Fultz and Paul George at the start, then a recap of the Rockets. Make sure you are subscribing to this podcast and checking out the rest of the Locked On Podcast Network, where the last 2 episodes of our Locked On NBA mock draft will be going up in the next 24 to 48 hours. So make sure you are checking those out, and I give my fantasy thoughts on those picks as well as Mike Schmitz from Draft Express giving his opinion on those players too. So make sure you are checking that out on Locked On NBA and the rest of the Locked On Podcast Network, and subscribe to this show so you never miss an episode. And if you could leave a 5-star review, that would be greatly appreciated. All right, guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya. Daryl Morey.